the role of low emissions coal technologies in an Asian net zero emissions future. The presentation covers the background in terms of the need, low emissions coal technologies and sectors where they will be applied, the challenge in Asia. I will not talk about country studies today, as the work on this aspect has only just started. And finally, key messages. Net zero targets are becoming increasingly widespread, as reflected in the latest updates to the nationally determined contributions and recent government announcements. A number of countries have now committed to net zero emissions by 2050 to 2060, including China and Japan, with other countries such as Indonesia exploring opportunities to rapidly progress towards net zero emissions by 2060 or sooner. From an overall perspective, this will require an increase in the level of renewable energy sources, particularly solar and wind, together with a reduction in the use of fossil fuels. There will be regional variations, however, where in Asia, the means of achieving net zero emissions should be balanced with low costs, energy security, economic growth, population growth, and increasing urbanization. Asian countries reliant on coal will need low emissions coal technology for power generation, for foundation industries of steel, cement, and aluminium, for the chemicals industries, and for the hydrogen sector. Carbon capture, utilization and storage, together with biomass and waste co-fire with coal, will be key enabling technologies to achieve this. The first key enabling technology is carbon capture, utilization and storage. From a technical perspective, the various elements of the CCUS technology chain are in place for commercial deployment, indicating that the barriers to widespread, large-scale deployment of CCUS are not technical. There are a total of 28 operational CCUS facilities globally at commercial scale, relating to natural gas processing, power generation and industrial applications, with the potential to store around 40 megatons of CO2 per year. The cost of CCUS, which is probably the single most important lever for its wide-scale rollout, has reduced significantly, with the current cost of capture of around $65 per ton of CO2. Further cost reductions can be expected through learning by doing. Recent project studies predict CO2 capture costs of around $43 to $45 per ton of CO2 are achievable within a timescale of 2024 to 28. Asia, and in particular China, should become a key focus for the rollout of commercial CCUS. The Jinji and Ordos CCUS projects at the 0.1 to 0.2 megatons of CO2 per year scale are examples of current demonstrations in China, with future plants including the Huaneng GreenGen IGCC Phase 3 plant at the 1 to 2 megatons per CO2 per year scale, for example, planned for 2025. Co-fire is the second enabling technology and is increasing in Asia as a means to achieve reduced greenhouse gas emissions in the short to medium term. A number of Asian countries have good agricultural forestry waste resource to further increase the potential of biomass co-fire to achieve reduced emissions. In Japan, the option to co-fire low emissions ammonia produced from fossil fuels with CCUS or from water electrolysis using electricity is being pursued as part of the country's national policies. As direct co-firing in pulverized coal boilers has dominated the sector for the last 20 years, this technology is more mature. It remains the most popular co-firing choice in countries such as Japan and South Korea. However, China prefers gasification indirect co-firing, where the first pilot test was carried out at Guadian Jiangmen power plant with a 10.8 megawatt gasifier in 2013. Asian countries, including China, Japan, and Indonesia, have specific policy instruments in place or planned to support biomass co-firing. Power generation is the sector with the highest proportion of greenhouse gas emissions, emitting over 8 gigatons of CO2 per year in Asia, almost half of the region's total CO2 emissions. State-of-the-art ultra-supercritical coal power plants currently achieve up to around 47% efficiency, equivalent to around 720 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. As this performance limit is largely set by the steam temperatures achievable with advanced steels, efforts have centered on developing an advanced ultra-supercritical power plant based on nickel superalloys. Smaller increases in steam temperature using new steels, together with advanced steam cycle conditions, have the potential to raise efficiencies to approach 50%, or around 680 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour in the nearer term. Several alternative high-efficiency pathways are based on gasified coal, and the integration of fuel cells technology offers the potential to further increase the efficiency of low-emissions coal technology. In the long term, efficiencies of around 60% lower heating value basis efficiency have been projected for such power plant at the multi-100 megawatts size range. CCUS remains the key technology to deliver very low emissions with coal-fired power plant, with demonstration projects in place in China, as described earlier. Supercritical CO2 cycles, such as the alum cycle, hold great potential to provide advanced power generation systems that can achieve higher efficiency plants close to full carbon capture at lower costs. Coal power plant offers the best option to provide system flexibility in the near term to support the increasing levels of variable renewable energy in the Asian case study countries. For the most modern ultra-supercritical power plant with high turn-down capability, the opportunity should be taken to retrofit CCUS technology so that the dispatchable power provided can do so with very low carbon emissions. Dispatchable coal-fired power generation provides high levels of inertia, which plays an important role in the overall power grid system response, including frequency disruptions and power factor corrections. Even when high levels, in excess of 50 to 70% variable renewable energy are achieved in the future, coal-powered generation technology will remain key to ensure security of supply. Consequently, an increase in variable renewable generation capacity does not necessarily allow for significant closures of dispatchable plants. Industry produces about 8 gigatons of CO2 per year of direct emissions, with the cement, iron and steel and chemical sectors being responsible for around 70% of these. Demand for industrial products is forecast to increase to grow at least through to 2050, driven by population growth of 2 billion people and growing in affluence. Almost 2 gigatons per year of the CO2 industrial emissions are byproducts of chemical reactions within the production process itself. These process-related emissions cannot be avoided using feasible production technologies. For example, 60 to 65% of emissions from cement production are created when the calcium carbonate is converted to calcium oxide, with these CO2 emissions produced as an inherent part of the cement manufacture process. China dominates the global production of cement, steel and aluminium, making 50 to 60% of the global quantities, and is a major producer of chemicals, which is set to grow in the coming decades. A portfolio of approaches is likely to be necessary to reduce CO2 emissions, including fuel switching to hydrogen, biomass, and electricity via electrification, where these are available at competitive prices. Improved energy efficiency, although this will not achieve net zero emissions by itself, and the deployment of current, best available and future innovations, including CCUS. To summarise the position of industrial applications, coal as feedstock and for process heat dominates in China, accounting for 70% of its steel, 83% of cement, and 75% of aluminium production. As noted already, there are opportunities for fuel switch to use biomass and hydrogen, potentially co-firing with coal, and some opportunities for electrification, particularly to increase the use of scrap steel and aluminium. But given the clear dominance of coal in China, coal will continue to be key through the transition, with CCUS retrofit essential as one of the key technologies to decarbonise the industrial sector. In terms of chemicals and fuels production from coal, gasification can offer the best production route in the Asian context. Gasification has a strong track record in China, which is to some extent due to the use of coal as a strategic measure to avoid dependence on imported feedstocks and due to the relatively high natural gas prices in China. The chemicals and fuel sectors are growing and are forecast to continue to grow through the transition, particularly methanol as an intermediate, substitute natural gas, coal to liquids, and tar deep processing and hydrogenation, together with lignite upgrading. There is some opportunity for process optimization to improve conversion efficiencies, but again, it is the use of CCUS which must be adopted to allow this industry to develop in a way consistent with net zero emissions. Hydrogen is the final sector assessed in this study and is the most versatile in that it can play into all sectors. The breakdown of the forecast use of hydrogen demand in 2050 is shown here, with a total demand of up to 78 exajoules or 650 megatons of hydrogen per year possible. This hydrogen would be used primarily for industrial feedstock and energy, together with transportation, heating and powering buildings, and power generation including hydrogen buffering. The spread of hydrogen usage across these sectors is relatively uniform, with significant quantities of hydrogen used in each. In terms of hydrogen production, the preferred method depends on local factors. In China, low emissions hydrogen production via gasification with CCUS is lower cost than low emissions hydrogen based on water electrolysis, typically by a factor of approaching 3. Given the economic advantage of coal gasification with CCUS, it is likely that this will continue to be a low-cost source of large-scale hydrogen in the near and medium term in Asia. Looking at the impact of the different hydrogen production methods, when CCUS is added to coal gasification, the carbon intensity can be reduced to below 3 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen based on 90% CO2 capture. Co-firing biomass with coal, increasing the capture rate to closer to 100%, or using advanced technologies such as the alum cycle, could all reduce the CO2 emissions closer to net zero, or even below in the case of biomass co-firing with CCUS. Having looked at the technologies, I will now look at the challenge in Asia. The Asian population is growing and will continue to increase through the transition, peaking at around 5.3 billion people in 2050 to 2060. This will be an increasingly urban population, with the fastest growing cities in the next 5 years almost all in Asia and Africa. This population growth will be matched by a growth in GDP. Asia has already grown from 13% of world GDP in 1960 to 33% in 2020. Indeed, China, India, Indonesia and Vietnam are set to leapfrog the richer nations in terms of GDP over the transition period to 2050. As a consequence, Asia now accounts for more than half of global CO2 emissions, accounting for around 17 gigatons of CO2 per year in 2018. China dominates this, with its tons of CO2 per capita now well in excess of the global average. It seems clear that Asia, and particularly China, are fundamental to the overall global challenge of achieving net zero emissions by 2050 to 2060. So to summarise, a number of Asian countries have now committed to net zero emissions by 2050 to 2060, including China and Japan. Increasing levels of renewable energy will be pursued, but due to the region's dependence on coal for power generation, for industrial manufacture, and to produce hydrogen and ammonia, coal will continue to be used for the next 20 years. This is in part due to the need to ensure security of energy supply and to provide dispatchable power to help provide a stable power grid as the level of variable renewable energy increases. This must be set against the backdrop of achieving the lowest cost solution to net zero emissions as the region grows in terms of population, urbanisation, and increasing economic wealth. In order to do this in a way consistent with achieving net zero emissions, technology will be crucial. There will be opportunities to co-fire coal with the region's significant agricultural and forestry wastes, and to co-fire with low emissions hydrogen and ammonia to reduce emissions. But to achieve net zero emissions, particularly in the hard-to-abate industrial processes such as cement, steel, aluminium, and chemicals, carbon capture, utilization, and storage will be a key technology. Thank you.